Go and do likewise. Sounds easy enough, right? Go, move, and do. Do likewise. It seems so simple. I have a good friend. His name is Annie Hickman. He lives in Houston, Texas. He does some Catholic speaking on the side, and he has a family, and he has a lot of kids. And he tells this story often where, his master bedroom's over here, his son's room's over here, so he has to walk by his son's room all the time. And he notices how much of a train wreck his son's room is. And he'll go up to his son, and he will say, "Clean your room. I want it done by this afternoon. Go clean your room." And he makes this analogy. He's like, okay, so I wait till the afternoon. I go back to my son, and I look at his room, and his room is a wreck. And he looks at his son, and he says, "I told you to clean your room. Why didn't you clean your room?" And his son looks at him and says, "Yes, I heard you. I heard you say, clean your room. And so I sat in my room and I memorized those words. Clean your room." And he says, "No, that's not what I wanted. I didn't want you to memorize my words. I wanted you to do what I told you to do." Now, of course, this didn't really happen, but he makes an analogy between how Christians act. A lot of times we will hear Jesus' words, we will love them, we will hold them in our hearts, we will memorize, "Go clean your room." We might even memorize it in the Greek and the Latin. But Annie will say, he says, "But I'm still upset with my son. Why? Because the room isn't clean." Sometimes, brothers and sisters, we just must go and do likewise. We must be like the Good Samaritan. We have to have a conviction and an attitude of our heart that allows us to be of service. In one of the great Christ hymns in the scriptures, it says, "Humbly regard others as more important than yourself." Humbly regard others as more important than yourself. This is a very hard attitude to cultivate within our heart, but it is a necessary one. Martin Luther King, great civil rights advocate, great orator, great pastor, he read the Good Samaritan. In one of his speeches, he points out that the priest that passed along the other side, the Levite that passed along the other side, although they saw the victim of the robbers, the man laying half dead, they ignored him. And he says they might have had good reasons. Don't we often have good reasons? The priest, if he had touched someone who was bleeding, half dead, would become ritually unclean, therefore not able to do his work. The Levite was probably busy running to a church meeting or something like that. Well, what Martin Luther King also says is that this particular area of road from Jerusalem to Jericho is a very dangerous area. It was called the Bloody Pass because of the amount of people that were killed and robbed and beat for the things that they had with them. On this Bloody Pass, it changes landscape. It goes from a very high altitude to a very low altitude in a very short period of time. There are lots of switchbacks for travelers and sort of places for people to rob and to hide. So what Martin Luther King says is that the Levite and the priest, and he would submit also sometimes the Christian, when we see people in need, that when they're walking along the way and they see someone suffering, they say, "What will happen to me if I help them?" The priest would have been ritually impure. and not able to serve. The Levite might have been late for their meeting. And they're responding to this fear. You can almost imagine yourself in the same scenario where you're walking along this dangerous road. Imagine yourself walking in downtown Dallas through an alley late at night, and you see someone on the side hurting. What do you think? Even if you've seen them and they're crying out for help, you think, maybe they're trying to set a trap. Maybe they're trying to hurt me. And we're thinking about ourselves. Martin Luther King says the Christians should cultivate an attitude that doesn't say, what will happen to me if I help them? The Good Samaritan's attitude, where Jesus says, go and do likewise, his concern was for the injured man. What will happen to him if I do not help? That is a change in perspective. It is a change of the question that lies in the depth of our heart. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go to downtown Dallas and look in the alleyways in the middle of the night. What I am suggesting is that when we think about our Christian expectations of our lives, of service, if I serve, I won't be able to do this. If I go out and help the poor and I lend them my financial resources, I won't be able to do this. The careful calculation of the opportunity cost within our lives is not the attitude of go and do likewise. The attitude that is the Lord's, that we want to cultivate within our heart is, if I don't help, what will happen to them? Jesus did not say, if I follow after the Father, if I preach the good news, what will happen to me? Jesus came into the world knowing that if he did not, what would happen to us? We would die, eternal death. Our trajectory was hell. And not thinking of himself, but thinking about us, he mounted the wood of the cross, and he paid far more than 2 silver coins, his very self to ransom us for our healing, so that we may live, so that we may be restored to health. And then he tells us to go and do likewise. And so this week we ask ourselves, what attitude are we operating out of? And when we notice perhaps the attitude that thinks about ourselves first, we ask the Lord, help me. Help me to be able to view the world and say, what will happen to them if I do not serve?